So as you can see on the screen, we're going to be going over some factory design utilities. I'm kind of calling this Factory Design Utilities 101, AutoCAD and Inventor, because factory design utilities is such a large encompassing tool available to people with the product design and manufacturing collection, and it'll take a little bit longer than maybe an hour to go over everything that's in there. So if today goes well and it is well received by you all, the audience, I can definitely expand this to more sessions covering more of the functionality. Beyond just some of these basics, going from AutoCAD to Inventor. Even if people aren't using things like the process analysis tools, as well as some of the material transportation tools within Factory, you can certainly use a lot of the layout tools to simplify the facilities design that most of you are possibly doing. So let's go ahead and get started with that. If you do have any questions, definitely type those in anytime. I have a team of people monitoring all the chats and the questions, so send those in and I'll definitely get those answered. So with that, let's go ahead and start moving through here. Cool. So like I mentioned, we're going to be going over factory design utilities for AutoCAD and Inventor. So let's just go ahead and start with a couple of things. A couple of things we want to cover today. So first, what is factory? What are the design utilities that you speak of? I know there's a little bit of confusion with the suite. It used to exist as a suite, now it's part of the collection. I'll kind of clear all that up for everybody. Two, understand the workflow between AutoCAD and Inventor. So the really cool thing about Factory, and I'll express this a little bit more in detail, is that you can have your traditional 2D facilities layouts, that get all of your information, your spacing, things like that. And also get the detail that you may need with things in 3D, like Inventor, or even moving over to Navisworks, maybe bringing in point clouds from Recap. And then lastly, I know that there is the factory library, an assets library that I'll show you in a little bit, with hundreds, if not thousands, of existing factory assets. But I'm assuming that most people on this this webcast right now have certain things that their company uses, maybe some tooling that you've created that is unique to yourself. And I'll show you how to, if you're using that in multiple facilities, maybe you're using it in multiple instances in these facilities, I'll show you how to create factory assets out of your existing parts or assemblies to be able to reuse a lot easier than pulling that whole assembly into a larger assembly many times, in which that's going to be super taxing on the software. So let's move on a little bit here. So this is the included software in the product design and manufacturing collection. And why do I bring this up right now? I'm bringing this up solely because there was some confusion as to what happened to Factory. Why is it in here? What happened to the Factory Design Suite? Why do I have AutoCAD architecture in my product design and manufacturing collection? I'm not doing AEC things. I'm not building buildings, things like that. So factory design utilities used to be included in what was called the Factory Design Suite, similar to what most people are familiar with the product design suite. It included Factory, included AutoCAD architecture, Navisworks. But the factory design utilities is a set of tools that spans over a couple of products, right? So your Inventor, it spans through AutoCAD architecture and mechanical. Today I'm going to be using AutoCAD mechanical, but you can freely use AutoCAD architecture if you do wish. And it also connects that with Navisworks, which is an awesome visualization tool, helps you figure out clash detection. And then Recap Pro as well kind of brings that all full circle, where you can bring things like point clouds of your facilities into your Inventor models, and then into your Navisworks models, and be able to kind of see what your factory is going to look like in your actual space, or what that layout's going to look like in that actual space. I know they use the word factory all the time. It isn't limited to factories. We were redesigning the office a couple of months ago, and I built the office in things like Factory to see where desks would go and chairs, and so on and so forth. So I like calling it facilities design as opposed to factory. That's just if you hear me say facilities design tools, facilities design, that's what I mean. And that's just, for me, it makes a little bit more sense. So if you have any questions on any of this, let me know. These are all things we cover during AVA, products in this collection. So if there's something you want to see in the future, let me know. Cool. So what is this, you may ask? And I'm sure this looks pretty familiar to a lot of people on this call. This is a 2D layout, you know. Traditionally, most people are doing their layouts in 2 dimensions. They are, you know, creating their doors, their windows, things like that, and then they're going to lay out their equipment within that factory or facility with simplified blocks. So maybe, you know, you're going to use a square instead of one of these CNC machines that I've got here. You might use like a rectangle to represent that. That doesn't necessarily give you information on, you know, vendors, pricing of that, and then, you know, going into future things like manufacturing time, loading time, things like that. You might have circles that represent, say, like a control unit or something. But this is traditionally what it's looked like, and I see a lot of customers who do their facilities design, and I have a lot of industrial machinery customers. You know, they're doing vessels that are circles and things like that. They're simplifying it all, and they just have it in 2D. But you know what? You know, moving into the future, there's a lot more need for 3D models, and I see the demand higher and higher to get these 2D layouts into something that's a little bit more easily digestible. And Factory kind of helps bridge the gap between these traditional 2D layouts and the 3D layouts that you might want to see moving forward. So jump to the next slide here. This is the same representation of what was on that last slide, except this is in 3 dimensions. So we'll jump back to the last slide here real quick. You can see there are 3 CNC machines here in the bottom left-hand corner, as well as this weird like conveyor snake-looking thing. It's actually a conveyor, which is why I said conveyor in the first place. And these are the 2D representations of those blocks. Kind of, you know, if you're looking bird's eye view, what is that footprint going to look like, or that frontal area going to look like if you're looking straight from the top? And, you know, Factory kind of helps you convert that into space like this, where you're using some of the DWG underlay technology that you've seen me use in AVAs in the past, and get some of those 3D representations of those exact assets that we had in that 2D layout. So let's see, we got a couple questions coming in. I'm just making sure that everyone's good to go. Definitely hello, Jorg from Germany. Awesome to have you back. It's been a while, so that's good. All right, let's move on a little bit. So I'm gonna kind of show you how to bridge that gap between 2D and 3D today. As you can see, there's that little bounding box on top of everything that happens to be a point cloud, which is kind of cool. And I'll show you what that is and what that scan actually looks like. It's actually really, really awesome. So let me actually jump in products. I'm gonna end my PowerPoint real quick. And let me go ahead and jump straight into AutoCAD. So like I mentioned, you can use the factory design utilities in, excuse me, AutoCAD Mechanical or AutoCAD Architecture. I personally use AutoCAD Mechanical, just what's on this machine. Feel free to use Architecture if you want to build things like doors, windows, kind of get those 3D representations of those objects. All right, so I've got a couple of things built out here. I don't need this drawing. Awesome. So let me go ahead and kind of get this built. So this is that 2D layout that we had earlier. I added a couple of things. There's this block here. So, you know, sometimes you would identify some of these machines in our previous layouts as simplified versions of them, right? So circles, squares, maybe you even go into 3D and use cubes or spheres. But in this case, you know, I added a block here that is a cube, I believe, or a box. This guy I named Winston. And then I've got 3 fork trucks here that I've already put into this layout. So say your architect gives you this 2D layout. How are you going to start populating this? Well, let's first start in the factory tab. Once you install factory, you get an extra tab up here in AutoCAD. Same thing with Inventor, you'll see it as well. Essentially, it's next to the home tab. I had a case a couple months ago where if you double click this, it changes the look of the actual ribbon. So I had somebody's who's looked like this and they couldn't see anything. So just a quick tip, if yours looks like this, just double click the tab and it'll bring back the ribbon as normal. And so this quick tip for you all as you're moving on here. So as you can see, I have a couple of different things on my screen here. I've got my material flow browser, asset browser, factory properties. These are all factory specific browsers or tool panels, I guess you could say, and you can get those from here. So if you click the down arrow here on palettes, you'll get an extended ribbon here, and you can select some of these options. So the asset browser, the block browser, material flow, and factory properties. And so you can get these panels to show up, or you can get them to go away by clicking here as well. So I have my asset browser up. There's things like the asset builder. We'll get into that shortly. Essentially, this is how you add your assets to the actual library, whether that is library on your personal machine, something you share with other people. We're not going to be doing that in AutoCAD because it's way easier in Inventor. It's way more intuitive in Inventor. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start with the asset browser. There are things like the ability to create material flow diagrams, kind of do some process analysis in factory. Today, we don't have enough time to do that, but if there is a need for that, definitely spend a future session going over that. I just want to, kind of start with the basics, be able to place facilities assets within these actual layouts, show the 2D to 3D workflow, and then move on from there. If we have some time at the end, maybe I'll jump into there a little bit. But here's my asset browser. You can undock this and dock this as you wish. I'm just going to dock this if it will let me over here. Maybe not. There you go. Cool. So this is the asset browser. So what is an asset? An asset is any factory object that's created. So things like robots, things like welding machines, things like conveyors, racks, CNC machines. Like in this case, we're going to add to this. They all exist in the asset browser through either system assets or cloud assets. And I'll show you what that means here in a little bit. So if we looked at that 3D representation we had earlier, we had a couple of Haas CNC machines in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in Haas, which is cool because some of these manufacturer actual products are in here already from Autodesk out of the box. So I think almost all of these are, these are all out of the box. I have not customized any of these. So as you can see, we've got a lot of very popular Haas machines. I've actually seen some of these in person. We had an event at the Haas factory outlet in Torrance a couple of months ago. So definitely shout out to those people over there for making awesome machines. I'm going to put some of these in my layout. So you know what? Let's go ahead and go with the VF10. I know this is a big guy. So what I'm doing is I'm double clicking this. As you can see, as I hover over this, it tells me it's a cloud asset and it's available for use. I can even add it to my favorites folder if this is something I use over and over again. So once you click anything in AutoCAD, you can look at the actual bar here at the bottom. And this tells you, hey, what you need to do next, what action needs to happen based on this. So this command line is going to tell me, hey, please input the insertion point or base point. So I'm just going to click anywhere here. As you can see, the insertion point on this is in the rear left corner, but I just need to put the base point somewhere, and then I can rotate this as I want. So I'm going to go ahead and click right here. And as you can see, as I move around, it lets me rotate this as needed. So I'm actually going to put it right here. And then if you're done, it automatically starts placing another one. But if you're done, I just right click, hit enter. It gets me out of that command. You can also hit escape. That'll do it as well. Let me go ahead and add another one. Well, actually, in this case, I want the VF5. As you can see here in the asset browser, there are a couple of check boxes, or I guess check circles, at the right-hand corner of these objects, meaning that they are available for use. So if I hover over this VF5, it tells me it's a cloud asset, and I can right-click to download it before using, meaning that these live on the cloud. Autodesk has their big library of assets, and if you want to use it, go ahead and download it. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click and download this guy. And as you can see, in a couple of seconds, it's going to give me that checkbox. It's downloaded, and then once it's done, it's going to turn green. So pretty simple. I'm going to double-click this again. And I'm going to go ahead and place that here as well. I know that this facility might not be the most efficient in terms of layout, but I'm just showing you what this looks like. You can use standard AutoCAD commands like move to move these things around after you're done doing that. But let me just place those. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of items within the asset browser. So let me just go up a folder again. Like I mentioned earlier, you got system assets, user cloud assets. You can even search results, or there's that favorites folder, like I mentioned before. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to type in Ketiv. So I actually have the CNC machine that I labeled for AVA today. This could be anything, right, that your company decides you want to use. I'm going to go ahead and double click that and just place that in here as well. You don't just have CNC machines, you've got other things. You've got racks, storage racks, you've got conveyors like I mentioned earlier. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some conveyors in here. Just real quick, and I'm going to show you some of the really cool asset chaining right now with the conveyor. So I've got this belt conveyor. It's got a chain here at the top, which is cool. And I'll show you what that chain means. So it's going to have me pick a start point or select a polyline. I'm just going to select this point right here and select my next point, say, you know, some feet, number of feet out here. If I click it, it's going to include that conveyor. If I keep clicking, what it's going to do is it's going to turn that for me, which is really, really cool. And what it's doing is it's chaining the assets together. As you can see, there is this, I'll show you real quick. There's this green square here at the end. There's another green square at this end right here, noting that, you know, that is where the chain between the products actually occurs. And you can denote that when you're publishing assets, so you can chain things like racks together. So on and so forth. So I'm just going to do one more thing here. I'm going to put some racks in here. Let's just go with what's something I've downloaded already. There we go. I saw one. This louvered rack. So I'm going to put some of these in here as well. As you can see, if I get close, it's going to chain because those chain points are on the edges. If I don't get close, it won't chain. So I'm going to go ahead and chain a couple of these guys together. Whoops, don't want that. You can always hit escape to exit these commands. So cool stuff. So I put those in there. As you can see, we're still in 2D AutoCAD, but what I'll do is I'll hold shift and I'll rotate this a little bit. As you can see, that's all still in 2D. But because, you know, this building was built in something like AutoCAD architecture, I have my walls already built in 3D there. Essentially, these are, you know, those bird's eye views of all of these objects and what kind of footprint that they take up from that space. I believe there are people that you can put in here as well. Forgot what that is. I think it's person. Oh, it's personnel card. I'll find those later. But anyways, straightforward. You can add assets as you wish into here. You can get rid of assets if you want to. Something really cool as well is, say for example, you have one of these old, you know, legacy drawings. Let me just go to the top view here real quick so it's a little easier to see. And you have, you know, created representations of some of your objects by creating blocks and things like that. What you can do is you can replace these assets. Say for example, this footprint actually is supposed to represent one of these CNC machines right here. A really cool thing is, as long as it's a block, you can right click it, or sorry, let me select it first. You can select it, right click, and then under factory, which is down here, you can go into the asset builder, create an asset out of it, or you can replace with asset. I think this is really powerful. So if you've got a lot of those legacy drawings where you've created blocks that represent your CNC machines, your conveyors, your racks, things like that, you can replace those with assets. So I'm going to go ahead and replace with asset. Did I do that? Yeah, and then let me go ahead and get that machine. There's a way to do this. This happen here real quick. Okay, well, I'll get back to that real quick. Anyways, there is one more thing that is really important. If you don't know what machinery you want to put in your particular layout, you can create these representations for them, and that's what this block is right here. So under System Assets, there is a folder, and that's where the people are, called Placeholders. Like I mentioned, people use spheres and cubes all the time to be able to represent the actual machinery that's going in those layouts. If you don't know exactly what spec machine you want in there yet, maybe you don't know exactly which vendor you're going to go with, but they are pretty similar in size. You can go ahead and put boxes, cylinders, spheres, hemispheres, stuff like that into there as well. And like I mentioned, there is a question in there, like, can you put people in there? Yes, you can put people in there. And there's a folder called General with man and woman. And then there's humans in different postures, I guess. So walking people, standing people. And you can kind of do some animations and some of the other tools, which is really cool to kind of simulate someone walking through your facility, which is really, really awesome. So once you put all of these objects in here, I know that this is probably not the best flow of a factory that I've seen in a while. But you kind of get the idea of how you do this. Essentially, once you kind of fix where all of these things go, you can go to Inventor. But before we do that, if you click any of these factory assets and in factory properties, which is brought up by here, you see what layer these things lie on. You see things like the title of this, the author who made it, part numbers, estimated costs. These are all things you can set for your custom assets as well. So just things to note when doing that. You can kind of put vendor. You can customize this a lot, which is great. And I'll show you that it's the same thing on the Inventor side. But once you're done creating this, you can sync with Inventor. So let me go ahead and just save this guy down real quick. And then you have the abilities to sync these guys to Inventor. But what I'm going to do is I've already done all of that. It takes a while. Essentially what it does is it loads this whole thing up, saves it down, opens it in Inventor. Let me show you what that looks like already. So here's a similar building floor plan in Inventor. Let me zoom out a little bit here and get this in there. As you can see, the DWG underlay is still there. Essentially, I still get those boundaries of where my facilities are. I now have 3D representations of all of my objects, which is really awesome. I know these objects are a little bit different. I did this one before. And all of these objects show up in the model tree as well. So you've got this Haas extended travel machine here as well as all those conveyors that I placed before that chained, and these racks. So the really cool thing about this is you can do a ton of stuff like you can normally in Inventor. I can grab objects, I can move them over if I really want to. As you can see, I still see that DWG footprint of what the machine looks like. But once it all updates and I sync back to AutoCAD, all of these changes that I'm making on the Inventor side will also propagate back towards the AutoCAD side, which is really cool. But in addition to like just moving stuff around, maybe you want to see a little bit different in 3D space. Maybe you have some clearance issues. Maybe you've got multiple floors of stuff. Let's go ahead and look at those properties for these objects again. Like I said, on the AutoCAD side, you do have another tab called Factory. You've got all of your palettes. Let me go back to that. Same thing in Inventor. You can double click, make the ribbon change in size and what buttons you can see. If it's like the compressed one or not. Same thing, asset browser, factory properties, factory asset preview. This is a little bit different. You've got factory asset preview where you can see a 3D preview of what the asset looks like in this little window. So I'll open that a little bit. You've got the same asset browser that you have. You've got the same thing, placeholders. You've got all of these folders. It's all the same. All of this stuff goes back and forth. All of this comes from the same database, comes down from the cloud that you can use on either or. And then, like I said, you've got factory properties. So let me actually go ahead and click one of these racks. I didn't mean to double click that and isolate the object, but let me go back real quick. So if I click one of these racks, it's going to show me things like it showed me on the AutoCAD side. It's on layer 0. Really cool thing is for these, I can change the width, depth, and height of this actual asset. So say, for example, I wanted to change that similarly to like things like iParts and whatnot using tables. I can go ahead and change the width. Let's go to 48 instead of 60. We'll change the depth and the height to be the same. And then we're going to go ahead and update this guy. And you can see that it used to be 5 wide. Now it's 4 bins wide, which is really cool. Something to note is I think the chaining on this is somewhere, it's either on the top or in the middle. So if I change the height on this actual guy, I think to 48, and I update it, I think it gets rid of everything on the bottom, which is something you don't want in some cases, just because that's how it changed. Just something I learned when I was going over all of this. So I'll go back to that, and it should look okay. So if you want to make changes to some of these, you totally can. You can even open these assets individually, make edits. Say, for example, one of the ones that comes with the factory design utilities is very close to something that you actually use in your factory, and you want to get that exact representation. You can totally open these, do saves as, do some things like save as to maybe a different name, and then go ahead and load those back up into the asset library, maybe with your company's name at the end of it. That is a little bit more tailored to what you actually work on, right? Say, for example, you guys don't use bins like this. Maybe you use ones that are double wide. You can do things like replace those. You just have to find out which actual parameters in this model are the ones controlling that. You can kind of edit those. So some cool stuff about that. Question: why does the plan view of the bin not update? Well, this is referencing the DWG file that I had saved on the AutoCAD side. This won't update until I update or sync back to AutoCAD. So hopefully that answers that question for you, Steven. Once I sync this back to AutoCAD, it'll take these representations and do the 2D representations of these and then update them on the AutoCAD side. So just like I mentioned, same thing if I like move this machine over, it's still gonna show this here. If I open the AutoCAD drawing, it'll still show it here, but if I sync it back to AutoCAD, it will update the 2D AutoCAD drawing to this 3D representation in Inventor. So there's a couple of things I can do. I can add assets. I added some of these as well. It's the same exact thing. Let's go ahead and just add a couple of things. Why not? Let's add one of these peoples. So I can just place these. I can even rotate them if I want to by changing some of these, repositioning them based on this glyph here. I'll just add one more, and we'll just put this person over here. With the asset library, it already has a defined landing spot or landing surface. Essentially, the bottom of their feet is the landing surface. You don't want these people like lying down in your facility, and then you having to kind of manipulate how that works. 99% of the time, these people are going to be standing on level ground. So the landing surface can be, parallel to is generally going to be parallel to the floor, which is why it's set up that way. I'll show you how you can customize some of those landing surfaces as we go ahead and change some of the assets. Something really cool too, looks like we've got some time to do this. I'm moving a little quickly here, cool. Is you can see that there's this like box or this prism, I guess, around all of this that isn't the building. You can see the building is there in green, but you've got this other prism that's white. Let me go ahead and change the view a little bit so it's easier to see and zoom out a little bit. Something really cool about this is actually a point cloud that I put in here. And what is a point cloud? Some may say, with the addition of some of the awesome 3D scanning technology that's been around for a while, but it's recently gotten tons cheaper, you can do full 3D scans of buildings or objects or whatever, and bring those into a tool called Recap. So I'm just gonna open that real quick. And here is Recap. And so what this is right here is this is a 3D scan of that building, what it actually looks like now, right? Maybe I want to reconfigure some of this, and that's why I'm doing this in the first place. But I want to get an idea of, there's some columns in here. I want to make sure I don't interfere with those and things like that. So you can bring those 3D scans into Recap, clean this up by getting rid of some of the machines that are in here already that you need to reconfigure so you can have a more efficient layout. But you don't get rid of things like the columns, things mounted to the walls that maybe you can't move, some of those fixtures, as well as some of the HVAC stuff, which is above this. This view doesn't show the HVAC, but the view I'm about to show you will. I just wanted to show you what the representation looked like real quick. And that's actually a point cloud. So I actually have it hidden right now. Okay. Here we go. And let me change the visibility of this point cloud. Sorry, I can't speak today. I need to rotate this guy a little bit more. I know my workspace is super big, but as you can see, I've got this whole point cloud, and if I rotate over, I kept the columns in there. I got rid of the machinery that was in there before, but I kept things like the floor. And I've got all of my HVAC equipment, right? So all of my ducting, all of my lighting fixtures, to make sure that if there is a clash between, you know, one of my new machines and the ceiling, I want to know about it. And you can do that clash detection in Navisworks, which we won't be going over today, but we can definitely go over that in a future AVA. And so how you add these point clouds in here, it's pretty simple. In the factory tab, there's the ability to open Autodesk Recap, which lets you create these or edit some of these point cloud files. What I'm going to do is I hit the attach button, I look for that particular file, I load it in, and then I select the position for it. Essentially, I dropped it in here, and it created this file. Really cool. This also goes on the 2D drawing in a different way. It's represented differently, and I'll show you what that looks like. I already synced this to AutoCAD. Well, actually, without the people, but I mean, it's more or less the same. And I'll show you that really quickly. So once you hit that Update AutoCAD button, it saves this Inventor file down, and it opens AutoCAD. If the file's already open in AutoCAD, it doesn't work. You have to make sure that the file is closed in memory on AutoCAD so it can open a fresh copy, because it'll say, hey, this file's being used in AutoCAD. Please close this. I'm sure that, you know, a lot of people have seen that when you're trying to do things like eject USB drives. It says, hey, this file is in use, or a file in this folder is in use. Please close it before you eject this. It's the same kind of case here. Like it says here on the screen, if you look at this block, point clouds are not displayed in 2D visual style, which is good because you don't want all of that jumbled mess in here unless you really want to see it, which is really what I do want to see. So I'm going to go ahead and change it into 3D. And as you can see, it showed up for a little bit there, but you still see that bounding box. But if you hold shift and start rotating around this, I know you can use like a 3D mouse to do this as well. As you move around it, the point cloud comes back. And if you stop rotating, the point cloud goes away. So if you want to see that in AutoCAD for some reason, that is how you do it. As you can see, I still have my 2D representations of all of my objects that I placed in here. And if I did hit the update button, which I won't because it'll take some time, it would have moved this particular machine up a little bit, and then it would have gotten rid of some of these racks here because I changed the actual sizing of that and add those people. So there's a workflow back and forth. Really, really, really cool. Let me go ahead and answer a couple of questions before we move on. There are a lot of questions, so let me go ahead and take care of a few of these. Can you place an asset at a different level than the floor of a layout? So you need something in space that operates above the equipment. Totally. When you put these objects down, you select a point in which they go to, whether that's clicking or actually typing that point into the command line. You can totally do that as well. Same thing in the Inventor side. It's probably easier to see on the Inventor side too. So that works. Let's see here. Replacing a block with an asset, will it replace all of the same blocks with that asset? No. It'll only replace those instances of that block. So if you click a block, replace it with the asset, it'll only replace that one instance of that block, not all of them. Say you had like 50 of them somewhere else, it won't replace them all. Let's see here. Can you copy an asset definition under a new name with little different changes? Yes, you totally can. I talked about that a little bit on the Inventor side when I was over there. Say, you know, you use something very similar to something in the cloud library. Maybe you want to add your own company flair to it a little bit to make it more realistic as to what you're actually using. Totally pull it out and then republish it. And on that note, I will now jump into publishing assets. There's a couple of things to note when publishing assets. Something really funny that happened this morning is I'm actually preparing for this webcast in our training facility in our little AVA recording room. And Javier, one of our instructors, another AE on the team over here, is actually teaching a factory class about 30 feet away from me, just on the other side of this door. And he was going over some best practices for this this morning. So definitely coincidental that we were going to be going over the same thing. Him for his class and him or me for all of you guys. Let's go ahead and jump into that. So I've got this canning machine. It's kind of simplified it's not complete, but it is 90% there. And I've got this canning machine, and you know what? I want to add this to my assets library. This is something that my company uses a lot. This is a machine that maybe is unique to my company, and I have, you know, maybe 10 of these across all my canning lines throughout North America, and I want to be able to use the same object for all of those facilities. Well, the easiest way to do that is create a factory asset out of it and start using that on the facilities. So what I'm going to do here is I can go ahead and jump into the factory tab, and I can jump into the asset builder, or if I'm in create asset, I can go into the asset builder as well. You can go to the asset builder, it brings you into the asset builder, and you can start selecting things like insertion points, landing services, and then connectors. But there's something really interesting about assemblies. You want to be able to simplify your assets as much as possible, because essentially it's the data that you're using to that needs to get loaded every time you load this asset. And so myself and Javier, and I'm sure a lot of other people, do not suggest creating assets out of full assembly files. What you should do instead is convert this assembly and simplify it as much as possible. Part of that is either like doing a shrink wrap or a derive of this. And so that is, I believe it's in tools. It's one of these. Here it is. It's under assemble. Shrink wrap, essentially what it does is it takes this and it creates a part file that is essentially the exterior of this file. So I created a shrink wrap of this, and it is actually over here. So this is shrink wrap. As you can see, this is the full model browser in the full assembly file. I've got sub-assemblies. I've got stuff everywhere, right? Here, it's a part file, right? So there's nothing underneath here. It's just a simple part file. And we do suggest starting here, or I guess continuing here when you're going to create those assets for your organization. Like I said, go back to the factory tab. And as you can see, you can do new layouts if you want. You can create assets. And then there's some help, which sends you to the help docs, which is actually super important. I'm going to jump straight into the asset builder. Like everything in Inventor, if you hover over the ribbon icon, it tells you what's going to happen when you click that. So it's going to go into the factory asset builder environment. And as you can see, there's this plane in the middle of my object, which is not what I want. Essentially, there's a couple things you need to do. You need to define a landing surface, and then you need to designate an insertion point. You can also designate connectors. Say, for example, this thing chains, like the conveyors do. In this case, this actually doesn't chain. These objects stand by themselves. And so what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and select a landing surface. It's going to get rid of that plane that I had there because it thought the landing surface was like the mid plane of this object. I don't want that. Essentially, this is the orientation this thing is going to land in your assemblies in, right? It was kind of smart and knew that, hey, the bottom of my CNC machines were going to be on the floor, not like upside down. If I click the top here, this is how it's going to land in my assembly. This is not what I want. I want it to land on these 4 feet here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redefine that landing surface, and I'm going to select this foot. And so that's how it's going to land. For that, I can. Where's that? Oh, here it is. See, I was like, where did my dialog box go? It was on the other side. So you can select that landing plane. You can even offset that plane if you want. Say, for example, it goes down to a point here and not maybe a surface, but I knew exactly how far that point was in the Y direction from the bottom of, say, this sheet metal piece. I could do that and then change the offset of that plane some coordinates. I can also change some of this if I want to, bring this up and down, left and right, side to side for these particular points if that is movable. Some cases it isn't. I'm going to go back to 0. And I can select the insertion point, right? So I can select maybe this corner and not that one. To be able to select points here. and preview. I think it's selected at that point. We'll see when I put it in there. But you can select these landing surfaces, and like I mentioned, yeah, it's right there. Cool. So like I mentioned, you can select these connectors. Say, for example, these things chain. Where is my... Oh, here it is, define connector. And my dialog box is on the other screen again. Oh, no, it's just selecting. So say, for example, it chained here. I can select that, and it chains out in that direction. Say, for example, I wanted a bunch of these to chain in a row for some reason. I don't, but you can totally do it like this if you wanted to. I'm going to exit out of that because I actually don't want this to connect to anything. I can start editing some of the asset properties. Let me bring this over. Things like title, and this is a canning machine. Subject, et cetera, company, Ketiv. We'll just put a couple of these in here. Descriptor, canning machine, version 1. We'll get into this probably on another AVA, but this is process settings. You can do some process analysis, some material transportation analysis as well on the AutoCAD side, and this is where some of that information comes from. You can have it specify a layer for this to go on. Maybe you want it to go on a layer called like canning equipment. You want that all to be on one layer in your AutoCAD drawings. You can do that here. And then there's a couple of customizable things you can do as well to add like custom fields and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. I've updated all of those properties for this particular model. And you know what? I can add variants. I can add connector class properties. But the most important button to hit here is publish asset. If I finish the asset builder, it won't actually publish this asset. It'll just go back into the general Inventor part environment that I was in before. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this guy. It's going to ask me to save the document before it can be processed. Do I want to save it? Yes, I do. And do I want to save all of these dependents? There's some dependents on the IAM side because it's still linked from the shrink wrap. You can break that link if you want to, which I suggest doing. So I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to publish this asset. Let me go ahead and bring this dialog box over. It's going to ask me, what do I want this asset name to be? I'm going to do canning machine, and then I'm going to do Ketiv version 1. I'm going to put it in the user assets folder. I can create more folders if I want to. This one's local. I can also put it on the vault. We did a full AVA on how you can set your factory up, your assets library and things like that in Vault. So if you do use Vault and want to be able to share these assets among your team, definitely do so. I can also put it in a cloud library, which is cool. You have to accept the terms for that. But let's move on real quick. Under 3D options, you can simplify the design if you want. Maybe you want to make it coarse. There are some options here to simplify it in here and do the shrink wrap in here. I've had some problems with that in the past. But generally, I just use part files anyways, so it's not a big deal. Generate Navisworks model, you can totally have that open. So you can, if you want to port this to Navisworks to do fly-throughs and stuff later, it exists. And then 2D options. I want to publish a 2D asset because I want a corresponding 2D view of this on the other side. I can view that 2D representation. I think it'll open AutoCAD here. Yeah, it's probably opening AutoCAD real quick. And then I can change it to wireframe or oh, I don't have TrueView. That's why. That's where it's going to put it. I can do hidden lines removed. I can do hidden lines. And then I can either publish a sketch or not publish a sketch. You can select which design view representation you want. Say, for example, you've got multiple view reps. Maybe you've got different configurations. You can publish the assets separately for each of those if you really wanted to. And I'm going to hit OK. It's putting the asset in that user assets folder on my machine. I'll show you how that looks here pretty shortly. And I'll show you how that actually ports over to AutoCAD, which is the coolest thing. Let's see here. So I'm back. Let's go back to my building floor plan. And we call that canning machine Ketiv. So I'm going to go back to my asset browser, and I'm going to go ahead and type Ketiv. And it showed up as my new asset that I just added, which is really cool. So you can go ahead and add this to your existing things. It exists on a folder on my local machine. So that's that. I will show you now that you can have that in AutoCAD as well. So if I type in Ketiv again in AutoCAD, load, it's only showing the CNC machine. It's like, why is that? And that's because it hasn't updated all the way across yet. So simply press this refresh button like Vault. And if you search again for Ketiv, you're going to get both. This is in alphabetical order, just to note. There are a lot of assets, so I do suggest creating your favorites or creating subfolders and stuff like that where you locate these things for things you use often, because there is a ton of stuff in here. And maybe you don't want to use all of it. You definitely don't want to use all of it. There's way too much stuff in there. So that's how you publish the asset. What I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and just place one of these in here. And while we're answering questions, I'll just place a few of these. I'll have this port back to AutoCAD and show you what that looks like. While we answer a couple of the questions as we're going. All right, it's executing that asset placement, and let me go ahead and answer a couple of questions. All right. Is there a good way to prepare an Inventor assembly to become an asset? If you've automated features, will the constraints be stripped? So yeah, like I said, best way to do it is to shrink wrap those assemblies, make them a lot easier to consume. In doing so, you get rid of a lot of those assembly features. And if you don't make it associative, then you're good. And then you just create that asset like I did earlier with this particular canning machine, and you're off to the races. Can you create an asset from a parametric assembly or a top-down design assembly? I don't see why not. You should be able to totally do that. I haven't done it personally, but I don't see a reason that you cannot do that. Can the manual tasks be animated and performed by the operators in factory? So that gets into a little bit of like the not 101 level stuff, let's say the 301 level stuff, where you can start doing some of those animations using things like Navisworks or maybe even 3ds Max once you're doing some of this to kind of animate some of those actions made by the people in your factory or those machines in your particular facility. It's totally possible, just not a 101 level course. We can go over that in the future. If that's something you're really interested in, definitely reach out. We've done some stuff for a couple of customers in regards to generating some of those animations for them. So if that's something you're truly interested in learning more about or seeing what's possible, let us know. Let's see here. So I've placed all of that stuff more or less. Let me go ahead and, yep, I've selected that and I'm done. So it'll place that component in there. I'm going to sync to AutoCAD. You can also sync to Navisworks. Like it says, it's going to be saved before the command can be processed. Do I want to save it now? Yes. And I'll show you right now that it's going to try to open it AutoCAD. It's going to tell me layout file is open in another process. It's open in AutoCAD right now, so it's not going to let me sync the two because the file's already open. So what I'm going to do is let me go down to my AutoCAD. Let me go ahead and close this file out. I'm not going to save this because I don't want any of those changes to save down. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to sync to AutoCAD again. It'll save this guy, sync it to AutoCAD, and it'll automatically open AutoCAD with those changes placed in here, which is cool. So do I want to open this in AutoCAD? Yes, I would like to do so. And then it'll open up that instance of AutoCAD. Might be in the back. It is. And let me make this full screen. As you can see, there is my new canning machine. So some cool stuff that you can do in here. Hopefully this kind of answered a couple of the questions by people in regards to factory. I know I can't cover a bunch. I only have about an hour to do this stuff for AVA. But if this is something that we want to deep dive into, things like some of these stations that I have here that show how the material flows from, say, here to this first machine, maybe the second machine, third machine, back down this conveyor, and then into storage. We can go over some of those workflows, things like transportation, where we can look at cool stuff like costing, how long it'll take, what the total travel distance is. We can go over that in the future. So if that's something you want to see, definitely let me know. And we can kind of figure that out moving forward for another AVA. Let me jump back to the PowerPoint here real quick. Just make sure we cover the last bits of slides here. Cool. So just a couple of useful links for everybody. There are over 100 AVA sessions now. I lost track a long time ago, but there are over 100 of them. We started in October of 2015. And if there's 52 weeks in a year and we skip about 2 every year, that's 50 back in October, or that's 100 back in October, and then another 15 or so till now. So there's a lot. So make sure you go ahead and check those out. There's a lot of factory stuff already on our YouTube channel, where we've done similar dives like this, moved into things like Factory and Vault, which is very specific to a lot of customers, as well as the Autodesk Knowledge Network. It's like my favorite thing in the world, and I'm not lying. If you click here, or I guess not click here, if you type knowledge.autodesk.com, just going to jump into that real quick. This is the Autodesk Knowledge Network, where you find learning materials. You can communicate with people, other users in the community as well. This is my favorite thing, where you can search items based on products. So say, for example, I'll just search all products. And I want to know how to create a factory asset. Going through all the help docs pretty much, and a lot of things that users like you and I have started to create. It gives you a lot of forum stuff where it's people having issues creating that. Factory assets can't be downloaded, but if you just search factory asset, it should bring up some articles for that. Let's go into some of the product documentation for that. So there's information working in assets, working with the assets browser. This is honestly one of the easiest ways to learn a lot of this. It gives you, a lot of this has been created by people at Autodesk, people at resellers like myself, and you can go through a bunch of tutorials, things like that through here. I'm sure that anytime you do a Google search of anything, it comes to the Autodesk Knowledge Network pretty much primarily. Anything you see in here, you can pretty much trust as it working in the software. You can look at stuff that I've published. I have a couple of things up here, so definitely let me know. If you see any of my things and want to give me some feedback on any of my articles, so on and so forth, definitely greatly appreciated. So that's the Knowledge Network. Just wanted to show that to everybody because I think it's super important. Let's go ahead and answer a couple of these last questions here. Does the AutoCAD side have to go through mechanical or architecture, or does it work with AutoCAD alone as well? You have to load factory in architecture or mechanical. I believe those are the only two that the factory tab works in properly, not vanilla. I'm not 100% sure if you run the vanilla profile in mechanical, if you can do it. I can test that and get back to you after. Is there a particular reason you want to do that, Kevin? If so, let me know. Essentially, Kevin's question was, if I've got vanilla AutoCAD, can I do some of this stuff? So yeah, let me know, Kevin, maybe offline. Anyone can email me at the email here. It goes to a couple of us here at Ketiv. We find the right resources for it. So if there's anything further than what we covered today that you want to cover, you can always either put that in the survey that I go through every week, or email us at questions.